significantly subsidize nuclear. And sometimes you'll do this, sometimes you won't. So what answer, write in chat right now, what do you think answer you would get? If you think of the target group whom you want to engage. They could be your family, community members. They could be people in your business. They could be the president of your country. Tim Stark thinks somebody says next to nothing. Ellen Siegel says half a degree down to 2.8. Christopher has this is great. Yeah, really into it. So 5.5 cents as a price. However, it's higher than that. You're surprised to see it's higher. Why is geothermal? We'll get into that later. Short answer, Karine, it is new zero carbon. Could be geothermal, less than 0.1, 0.5. Okay. Does this take account of the cost of nuclear reducing over time? Jennifer, good question. And Ellie actually answered it. I'll just give another note about this, about more of the structure of the model before we actually do the test. And this is a good one to know about, which is, yes, nuclear does get cheaper over time. Actually, this is not, we're back here with financial. I'm going to go back to that marginal cost. So do you see nuclear it's very flat. Why? It's not getting enough investment to get cheaper over time. The way things get cheaper over time, and later you're going to watch the economies of scale video, is that in the model, every doubling of cumulative capacity of an energy supply reduces the cost by what's called the progress ratio. This is the reinforcing loop. Every time you double installed capacity. So when you go back here to renewables, what has been happening? The best news in climate, frankly, is that this is what's being every year. And as the cumulative doubles, every time this doubles, not this number, but cumulatively installed, then the cost comes down. Because we've been building so much renewables in the past, then see that green line? Renewables have been getting cheaper and cheaper and cheaper by the progress ratio. That progress ratio, and when people want to learn about nuclear, wind, and solar, you could show them the progress ratio under assumptions. Go under here, nuclear, and click on this one, and then take the time, read the description. How much costs fall due to learning, experience, and economies of scale. With every doubling of cumulative installed capacity, the cost gets multiplied by the progress ratio. The progress ratio is 0.8, then it will decrease by 20%. However, we've studied nuclear, and it hasn't been getting cheaper. It's barely been getting cheaper. In some places, it's been getting more expensive because of the reasons I mentioned before. Therefore, it's only dropping in cost 2% with every doubling. The progress ratio right there is 0.98. So it would get cheaper if the progress ratio was different and if we were building more. Okay. Where was I? I was saying, ask people what you think it would do. Does it help a lot or a little? And then you test it. We'll test it here. Some people may want to say, I'm trying to remember, this is like a range of, let's have a big subsidy of 4 cents a kilowatt hour, and then it grows. Or maybe, I don't know, actually, let's push it all the way to the top. And, oh, wait, it's taxed. You got to put minus point. Oh, I always get trapped by this. 6 cents a kilowatt hour subsidy. 6 cents a kilowatt hour subsidy. So first you go, oh my gosh, it didn't do almost anything. Let's go back. One note, 3.3 didn't change, but look, hover over the number, 3.34. You can see another significant figure, 3.34, and then I'm going to do it again, 3.25. So it's actually 0.9 degree change. It's basically 1/10 of a degree is what it brought. And maybe I'll go all the way here so that you can actually see it as about 1/10 of a degree. So there's a surprise. Wait, why is that? Then what you do is you say, did it do what I thought it would do. Or did I type the number in wrong like Drew just did? So look in the bottom right and you can see the growth and see actually we got a lot of growth, a lot of growth. And here we go. Where would you find this? If you wanted to find it in the top graphs and show it, you go here and you would say nuclear, primary energy demand, and then do hit it a couple times. Like, wow, we're getting a lot of growth. We can show you compared to others' estimates if we want to go there, but basically to say, oh, look, what is it? And then do look at the numbers. This is a good moment when you can get grounded in, well, let's see, here in 2023, we have 11 exajoules and we're going up to 100. That's like 9 times as much. So we have a 9-fold increase. So why didn't we get a big result? Not because it didn't grow a lot. We had a 9-time increase in nuclear. So why would nuclear help? It would help if it was eating into coal. So it does. It successfully cuts out coal. You can see the change there. That will help reduce emissions. It would also help if it ate into natural gas. It did do that. Now you can say, is it going to displace oil? Ask that as a question. People go, well, no, oil is mostly for transport. This is for electricity, not unless we have electrification. Will it eat into oil? So the two of them together, that's another point you could get into. So you can see it eats into coal, it eats into gas, and then renewables though, now wait, what's going on here? It's crowding out renewables as well. This is an important point that most people don't include in their mental model. The good is the enemy of arguably the best. I say the best because wind and solar doesn't have as much waste damage. There are some rare minerals that are needed to make wind and solar, but it's much less than nuclear waste. So it is eating into, more nuclear is reducing the amount of wind and solar that we're already counting on. And we would like it not to do that, but that's not how the global economy works. So it's cutting some gas, it's cutting some coal, it's also eating into renewables. That's one of the main points. The second is that it takes a long time for this industry, which doesn't just leap up, it takes a long time for it really to get going, even when there is a subsidy. So here it is in the 2025 and to the 2040, and it takes a long time for it to grow and to push out all of the coal and the gas. So emissions only drop in the 2040s and 2050s. It is delayed. So it eats into renewables. It is delayed. Therefore, it's not helping very much. That's the short answer. And along the way, I want to show you how you look around the model to see other parts of the model. Now, one other thing that can be helpful, someone will see this graph and go, well, wait, what are we simulating here? Maybe you're kind of holding it back and not really simulating a lot of growth. So one test here would be by 2050, what do we have? We have, trying to see how many, 56-ish, 55 exajoules. And we're increasingly posting more of the comparisons. So the comparisons, for example, Janet in our team is sharing, and we'll be putting on the internet, more of our calibration and testing. So this is a deck. We presented a lot of this, and I'm trying to remember if it's in the training or not, but here is what we tested against. We've told you that we've tested against 3 integrated assessment models. You can see at the bottom, GCAM, Remind, and Message. So it's just interesting to see, are we consistent with what others say? Because people who don't like this result one of their first thoughts is, maybe the people at Climate Interactive are biased against nuclear. So they kind of dishonestly made nuclear look bad here. Whereas the other scientists out there all have a very different view. And I'm worried about that. So these are going to be some graphs that we're increasingly sharing that will show what others think is going to happen in a baseline. And then the next here would be, here's our baseline. So we are right in the middle of the pack through 2050, but in the longer term are more optimistic about the growth of nuclear than the others. They think it's heading away, that the industry would be going down over time. And then, so one note is we don't get a big benefit to a lot more because we're already assuming more than the others. So that's one factor. And then we also took the time to say, well, wait, what are the advocates for nuclear doing? And they think, well, here's the IEA STEPS study from last year. They think more would be coming in the orange. And then the advocates, the International Atomic Energy Agency, do you see that purple line and the green line? So what did we say before? Did I say 56 by 55 by 2050 in the high growth scenario? So it could be interesting to say, how close are we to what others would say? And 50, so we're right here in the high growth, whereas the IAEA, you see them? They think we could get up to 75. So that is the dream of the industry would be, could we get all the way to 75? So if you were engaging a really, really serious nuclear advocate, they'd want to say, well, I want to see 75 by 2050. Wouldn't that do much more? And so we do let you make things grow even more. So you could push it. And so is that 75? Yeah, that's close enough. Wow, I nailed it. 75 by 2050. So there it is. So you can say nuclear could be a contributor, but is unlikely to play a large role at limiting future temperature. That said, there's no one thing we're searching for. So if the world were open to it, this could be a way to reduce some emissions and reduce future temperature. Okay, I tried to touch on many different aspects here. Clara, Yazzie, Ava, Ellie, any aspects you think that were coming up? Because maybe people were writing in chat, but I wanted to show you all the aspects and angles, comparing to others' data, digging deeply into what's going in the model, hitting the main point at the end, hit the main point at the beginning. Those are some of the things I wanted to make sure that you saw. And also hitting some principles along the way. Capital stock turnover, some of those delays. Oh, and there's one other one. If we're talking about system principles, here's another one that I didn't get at. Another feedback in the system. Why do we get nuclear spreading around the world? Because we subsidized it, because it's cheap. We made it cheaper. And I'll go back to show you, you can see if you want, all the way back here. I'm going to go back. Okay, here's where we were. Remember this first graph I showed you? See the blue line? And I'm going to go forward one and forward another. Do you see how cheap we're making it? You can see the blue line dropping. This is the effect of all of that, those subsidies and that breakthrough. If it's cheap, what happens to global price cost of energy? It goes down. You see this cost of energy up here in one of our favorite graphs, cost of energy. If energy is inexpensive, what happens to the incentive to conserve and invest in energy efficiency? Well, there is a little boost to energy consumption because it doesn't make as much sense. You're not saving as much money by conserving energy. So we were back here at the baseline. You see the blue line in the left, final energy consumption goes up. This is what we call the price demand feedback loop. It is a balancing feedback loop. There's a whole video on this concept. Price goes down, demand goes up. Another important dynamic. So, Ellie et al., anything that people have been writing that is another shade of this answer that we need?
The chat was, yeah, we had a lot of questions answered in the chat. I think maybe we can move on to another topic.
Great.
That people were surprised. Yeah.
Great. Okay, so that was one. The second one that you voted the most for was carbon pricing. And I'm going to go back here, and I think it was, yeah, let's see. I'm going to go look at what you said. Carbon price got the second most votes. So let's go look at the dynamics of carbon pricing. I'm going to clear responses. And so here's another poll. What did you find surprising about carbon pricing? What should we look at regarding carbon pricing? What did you find surprising about, or what should I cover? What would be important that was, oh, I didn't expect to see that. And I can show you around aspects of carbon pricing. The poll is open. We're curious how cheap it was. Oh, carbon pricing diminishes climate change damage. It certainly does. Let's go look at that. How big of a tax is needed to make a real dent? That finally, it seems the fastest way to get temperature down, carbon pricing. And this is important, the role of delays. What is delayed? What is not delayed? And how do you go to En-ROADS to figure out what's delayed and what's not? How big of a tax is needed to make a real dent? And finally, it's the fastest way. Its effectiveness. Now, mind you, we're going to look at its effectiveness if we could get it. And it's been so challenging to pass these around the world. How bad it is, how bad carbon pricing is. It's exactly as expected. Listen to economists. Taxes work. $50 to $60 doesn't do that much. You need to double. Okay, let's go look at it. But I also just want to give some context. And this is one thing that we're bringing up at the 2:00 Eastern webinar. The overall, let me get this, the workshop. We recently just got some very interesting information. This afternoon, we're going to cover the new study by the World Energy Outlook, their prediction that oil and gas are going to peak by 2030. Fantastic news. That's what we're going to be talking about at 2030. Hooray. However, well, one reason that they think oil and gas is going to peak is because they took a hard look at policies around the world, and they think it is finally time. The International Energy Agency says they say we should count on carbon pricing being high and going up, not as a what if scenario, but they're like, we're going to include this in our forecast. So ask that, Fatih Birol, what is going to happen in the future of energy? They say we are going to have high and rising carbon prices. I was surprised by this. Look at this. Canada, $130 a ton, up to 150, 155.
Oh, Drew, you're not seeing your screen.
Oh, thank you. I've been sharing. I thought I was sharing. Thank you. So share the screen. I got too excited by this great news from the IEA. They think that these policies are all coming. Okay, here is what Janet found deep in the IEA study, which, could you post that link, Clara? I know you did this morning at 7 a.m. Here it is. China, $28 a ton, 43.53. China now has 30% of global fossil fuel emissions. So if a carbon price of 28 and then 30 and then 43 going up to 53, if that happens, we'll see how important it is. My point is, as you test a carbon price, the IEA thinks it's reasonable to test it. Korea is doing this. They also have other policies like that. And if you get curious, I encourage you to go look and see. They have a whole list of all of the policies that actually are in place and that are coming around the world. All right. So if carbon price is coming, what are the dynamics? What would it do in the dynamics of En-ROADS? Here we sit. Carbon price, you can, of course, just increase it here. I encourage you to hit the 3 dots, and you can see that it's $5 a ton. Again, when you see something like this, you don't have to memorize everything. What you do is you click on that triangle and you say, okay, what is this carbon price? Why is it $5 a ton? Well, go to the World Carbon Pricing Database, and often you can take whoever you're presenting to and say, oh, isn't this interesting? There's this place. And then they map all the carbon prices around the world. What is it? In France, it's 30. What share of emissions? 63%. Go join the journey with your people. Don't just be the expert. So why is it? I'll tell you it's 5 because a quarter of the world, as that database will show you, has a carbon price. Quarter of the world's emissions has a carbon price. The average is $20 a ton. So it averages to 5. And it's $5. And look in the bottom right, you can see it's 5 and it stays 5. You'll notice the IEA and others think coal, for example, is going to go down, 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 down in their forecast. We don't include that. The short version of why we have coal staying flat and the IEA says, no, it's going down, is they're assuming that carbon price and other policies get stronger over time. We don't in the baseline. We say, let's not strengthen these policies and let you test the effect of strengthening them. So when people say your baseline is very conservative, oh, facilitator, what's up with that? Why is it going all the way to 3.3? We don't strengthen policies. Ones like the IEA actually do. And one of the graphs that we'll be sharing that Lori just sprinted, Lori is our lead modeler, and she just developed it, and it's really great. She did a really fast comparison overnight as the study came out. This is overall emissions in the baseline, CO2, fossil fuel emissions in En-ROADS in blue, and then the IEA study here, which says it's going to be going down. We are more conservative because we don't strengthen policies, and we don't assume pledges will be delivered upon. We like to simulate if they are delivered upon, like banning coal emissions by 2030, as some countries are doing. We will include that in the model. All right, back to doing the carbon price. I'm encouraging you to go click on the dots. I'm encouraging you to read about it. And then you're going to pick something. And again, you'll say, hey, what if we had $100 a ton? Or you ask them, what would you like to test if you want? So if you say 100 and then you have them guess $100 a ton, type in chat if you would, what do you think people will say? Type in chat what people will say if we had $100 a ton. I'm looking down here. It'll go down to 2.7. Maybe you've tested it yourself. Constantine, respect if you did it. And I'm going to wait to see another one, maybe. Someone else is going to guess. Most people might guess what? Drop by 0.5 degree. What this is going to do, it is going to make coal, oil, and gas more expensive based on how much carbon there is per unit of that fuel. It's going to hit coal harder because there's more carbon in coal. It's going to hit gas less because there's a little bit less. And here it comes. 2.6. 2.6 is what it gets us. And importantly, the first key thing that somebody noted, look how quickly it helps. I'm going to show the pledges. I'm also going to make this larger. And you can see that if we implement a carbon price, it brings emissions down, not in the 2040s like uranium nuclear, but instead in the 2020s and 2030s. Why? A carbon price affects the utilization of existing capacity. Those coal-fired power plants, natural gas electricity production, the refineries that handle oil, et cetera, get used less today. We don't wait for them to retire out subject to capital stock turnover. They get used less immediately or very soon, and emissions go down soon. That's one of the big benefits, is that it drops emissions very quickly. There's some other benefits that we can go look at and other things to look at. So first of all, notice the lack of the time delays, and then go look around and see what does it do to various sources. Why did it help so much? Well, we really used a lot less coal. And one note, you notice it going up a little bit in the long term? Do you know what's going on there? Some of that is incentivizing carbon capture and storage. And you can go look and see this graph I showed you before, coal primary demand, but coal primary energy demand by use and CCS. A carbon price creates a revenue source that makes an incentive for electric utilities. Instead of cutting their emissions by reducing coal, they're going to add this technology called carbon capture and storage to their electricity generation. And some industry will do it. The gray areas are non-electric, like industry applications, and electric. So some of the growth that you see in the long term with coal is carbon capture and storage, which is built into the model at this point. You may say, wait, I don't think that's going to happen. I don't think CCS is a viable technology that's going to grow. Today, it's not very big. It may not grow much at all. What you can do, if you scroll down under here, and you can see, you can say, carbon price encourages carbon capture and storage, that market exists in this run. You can turn it off and say, you know what? I don't believe it. And so you get to see the difference between the 0.1 degree that CCS gets us versus without the CCS. Okay, there's one way to look at the role of CCS. Okay, but my point is, you've cut coal. You also can say, what did we do to gas? Cut that. There's some growth because of CCS in the long term. And then oil, but not quite as much. It's about $100 a ton. It's something like 85 cents on a gallon of gas. So it doesn't change the oil markets that much, but it does change it soon and some. So it helps a good bit there. The other thing to show with carbon price is it's the opposite effect regarding energy costs. Cost of energy goes up. It is a tax. Energy would be more expensive because there's this tax applied to it. If energy is more expensive, what does that do to energy consumption and the investment in energy conservation and efficiency? It's the opposite of what happened with nuclear. Nuclear make energy cheap, less efficiency investments in conservation. This made energy more expensive, so therefore there's more efficiency and conservation. There's a multiplicative effect to go show. Now, my point here, as you show people this, you'll practice and look around. Your job is not to just know all this. It is to go look around, understand the system principles, figure out what's going on, and then trace through many of these impacts. A couple other things to note right here. I skipped over cost of energy, but wait a second. We don't just care about climate, we care about equity. Right? What do we do about this? This is a concern. Cost of energy going up. How does it affect marginalized communities? Our friends at Citizen Climate Lobby say dividend some of the revenue back to people so that that doesn't hurt them disproportionately. And there is how much? 2.6 trillion per year created in revenue that could be dividended back. So there's a look at overall carbon price. I realize, Ellie, and Clara, and Ava, I powered through my goal. I had hoped to get through these two tests sooner. So just stepping back again, the principles are explore the model together with your users, look to see if you can understand yourself and with them why what's going on is going on, and hit the main points at the beginning, at the end. I'll pass it back to you for a chance to talk to see what's next, Ellie and Clara.
Thanks, Drew. So given the time, and so maybe we can stick around for a few questions and then pass the hour, or whenever we are done with some final questions, we can move on to breakout rooms so you get the chance to connect with each other. So has anyone seen some questions that you want to address? I'm asking.
Yeah, the first one I saw, many people in the chat mentioned one other co-benefit that I didn't to this carbon pricing scenario. And that is, while there's an equity challenge with cost, there is a beautiful impact when it comes to air pollution and the impact here. PM 2.5 emissions. This is the haze. This is the air quality problems that are implicated in cardiovascular disease, asthma, heart attacks, and contribute to 1 in 10 deaths around the world. Those emissions drop steeply because we don't burn coal. This is a change to environmental injustice, and this is an excellent result. Others that you saw, team?
Yeah, there's a lot of people asking about energy storage and batteries. So we have that within the renewable energy slider. And
so when you go under here, scroll down in renewables, storage R&D breakthrough. So here, what if we have better batteries, and this gives a better possibilities for storing renewable energy, therefore lower costs and more growth of renewable energy. Other questions or topics that we should cover, Clara?
So, there are other questions about what are the weak areas of the model. Of course, that is addressed way later in module 8. But I don't know if you want to talk about it.
I think we should defer to the confidence building section where we really cover that. This is the time for this section of those sliders, or more about your learning process and how you're building your capacity. But overall, I think we have 6 minutes now before we get to the end. And I think I actually need to pass it off to Ellie and Clara to facilitate. So I'm going to drop off because I have a hard stop in 1 minute.
Thank you, Drew.
Thanks so much, Drew. All right, everyone. Okay, so write your questions into the chat and we will try and get to them. And then, as Clara said, what we're going to do here is we'll take a few questions that you all have in the chat up until the top of the hour, And then at the top of the hour, we know many of you all will need to run to other meetings, on to your next things in your day. So feel free to log off. But for those who are interested in sticking around, we will open up breakout rooms and send you all into small groups for a discussion question about electrification. So stick around for just a few minutes and we'll offer you that opportunity. But if you need to leave, totally get it. Thanks for joining us. All right, so and so here we have a carbon price that is $105 per ton. So this is just a rough kind of way I think about it. But about $100 per ton CO2 is like adding $1 to a gallon of gasoline. And I'm sorry for the US units for everyone else out there around the world, but that's what I have in my head. You all run the conversions, but it's about $1 added to a gallon of gasoline, which is a lot. And so, as someone has already noted in the chat, when we think about carbon pricing, when we think about taxes on the different fossil fuel sources, it's really important for us to think about how those policies might be implemented in a way that makes sure that the burden isn't then carried by those who have the least economic ability to grapple with it. That increase in energy burden that can come from rising energy costs can be very significant, and we have already seen throughout history has led to backlashes and different types of policies done to try and address emissions and for other reasons. Other questions from the chat? I can't see it, so keep feeding them to me, Cleta or Ava. Actually, let's take one more question, and then we'll switch over to the breakout rooms.
Yeah, so there's Steve has his hand raised. Maybe we can unmute Steve quickly. Ask to unmute. Yeah.
Actually, I was asking about the carbon price to gasoline, and you said $100 a ton is $1, and I was just saying if that's somewhere in the model, if there's a slider, if there's something that we can play with in the model to show the variation as carbon price goes up, what happens in the real world to what people would pay if there were no subsidy?
Yeah, well, so there's not a direct corollary in the model because the way it would play out has a lot of nuance to it, right? Like the price on carbon, how that gets passed to the consumer could look very different depending on how that carbon price is designed. And that's where I bring up that point about equity. It's not to say that like that's what would happen if there's a carbon price in the carbon fee and dividend approach. People get the revenue back. There could be other ways where you're funding different means of people getting around so that those the cost of transportation decline. So we don't have a good proxy for that other than those just kind of like talking points around it. But one of the things, and
I did actually, we were talking, I actually saw you have an article on it, and I posted it in the chat about it addresses how does carbon price affect gasoline. So I think we should all look at that too.
Great. Thanks, Steve, and thanks for your question. The one other thing I was going to say too is that coming soon, we're going to add more graphs around energy costs. So looking at cost of energy as it relates to oil and coal and individual graphs. And so really being able to zoom in on that energy burden associated with that is a future feature release that we hope to release soon. All right, so now I'm going to stop sharing, and what we are going to do is in the chat, Cleta or Ava will post the instructions for the breakout rooms. So as a reminder, if you've got to go, we understand it. And if you want to stick around, great. We're happy to have you. And we will break into small groups. And the prompt for the breakout groups is this. So think about it as if you are facilitating an En-ROADS event and you find that your audience, your workshop participants, they look at electric cars and they're saying, I think that these are going to save the climate. But then when they move the slider for electric cars, they see that it doesn't have so much impact by itself. So this is a scenario without any other sliders pulled. What's going on there? So that's the question I want you all to take to your breakout rooms. Ava is getting those set up. And when you join your breakout room, introduce yourself briefly, name, where you're located in the world, and then one person in the breakout room, share your screen, open up En-ROADS, and move that transportation electrification slider. And then as a group, talk about some of those dynamics and what you see there. And we'll have those breakout rooms open for 10 minutes or so, and then we'll pull everyone back to the main room. We can share some insights that come up, maybe answer a few more questions that come up, and then we will probably wrap it up after that. So Ava, are you ready to open up the breakout rooms? And if so, why don't we do that?